The October air in the Texas Hill Country carried the first crisp promise of autumn, a welcome reprieve from the blistering summer. At the Sunset Shores Estates annual Harvest Fest, the scent of grilled hot dogs and freshly cut grass mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of pumpkin spice, everything. Children shrieked with laughter in a bounce house shaped like a giant gourd, while their parents congregated around coolers, trading gossip and commiserating about property taxes. Travis Merrill felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign tribe. He leaned against a mature live oak at the edge of the community park, a bottle of water in hand, watching the sea of khaki shorts and polo shirts. He'd only come as a courtesy. His 240-acre ranch, Lot 7, was technically an island, grandfathered out of the Sunset Shores Homeowners Association when the development was first carved from the surrounding scrubland a decade ago. He paid no dues, followed no bylaws, and answered to no one, a fact that he knew was a persistent, low-grade irritant to the community's leadership. A path cleared in the crowd, and through it walked Karen Rivera, president of the Sunset Shores HOA, clipboard in hand, a laminated name tag bouncing on her chest. She moved with the serene, unassailable confidence of a person who believed rules were not merely guidelines, but a form of divine scripture she was uniquely qualified to interpret. Her smile was a masterpiece of suburban diplomacy, bright, fixed, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Travis, I was hoping I'd see you here," she called out, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of the nearby clusters of neighbors. They turned, their conversations tapering off. Public theater had begun. "Karen," Travis replied, his tone even. He gave a slight nod, not rising from his lean. She stopped before him, her smile tightening a fraction of a degree. "Enjoying the festivities. We had the barbecue catered this year, a big improvement over last year's potluck. Don't you think far more organized?" "It's a nice day for it," Travis said, offering nothing more. "It is," she agreed, her eyes flicking over his worn jeans and dusty boots before returning to his face. "Listen, I don't want to spoil the fun, but the Architectural Control Committee asked me to give you a little something. Just a friendly reminder." She detached a single sheet of paper from her clipboard and held it out. It wasn't in an envelope. It was an open letter, for all the world to see. A few neighbors edged closer, pretending to look for their kids. Travis took the paper. His eyes scanned the heading, "Courtesy Notice of Potential Covenant Violation." "My unapproved dune," he read aloud, his voice quiet, but carrying in the sudden lull. "The large terrain feature on the western edge of your property," Karen clarified, her voice a model of pleasant reasonableness. "It's become quite prominent. Several residents have expressed concern that it's beginning to impede the natural view corridor from the upper lots. We just want to make sure all landscaping modifications are in harmony with the community's aesthetic standards, as outlined in the governing documents." Travis folded the paper once, slowly, and with perfect precision. "My ranch isn't in the HOA. Karen, it's not subject to your governing documents." "Oh, we're all part of the same community." "Travis," she said, the smile never wavering. "And the covenants, conditions, and restrictions apply to all properties within the original plat. Unless a specific exemption is on file, I checked. There isn't one for large-scale terrain modification." It was a masterful performance of polite aggression. She had cornered him, publicly questioned his standing, and framed him as an uncooperative outsider in front of the very people he shared a county road with. Every word was carefully chosen to be both deniable and humiliating. Travis pushed himself off the tree, standing to his full height. He looked directly at her, his gaze steady. "Thank you for the reminder, Karen. I'll review this with my own copy of the governing documents and my original property survey." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply stated a fact. A promise of a methodical, procedural response. He had refused to play her game on her field. For a fleeting second, a flicker of annoyance crossed her face before the serene mask snapped back into place. "That's all we ask," she said brightly. She turned to the listening neighbors. "Isn't it a glorious day? I think the chili cook-off is about to start." As she walked away, the buzz of conversation resumed. But now it was peppered with whispers and sideways glances in his direction. The hook had been set. The courtesy notice felt heavy in his hand. Not just a piece of paper, but the first shot fired in a war he never wanted. Back in the quiet solitude of his ranch house, the sounds of the Harvest Fest faded into a distant memory. The only noise was the low hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. The house smelled of leather, wood smoke, and old books. Travis spread the documents across the vast, scarred surface of his oak dining table. The HOA's courtesy notice. A thick, 3-ring binder, labeled Sunset Shores Estates, CC&Rs, and a long, rolled-up tube secured with a rubber band. He carefully unrolled the tube. It was the original plat map and survey of his property, a relic from the day he'd signed the deed a decade ago. The crisp, architectural lines detailed every boundary, every easement, every topographical feature of Lot 7. He ran his finger along the western edge, where the dune now stood. The paper was cool and smooth beneath his touch, a tangible link to the dream he had poured his life into. Next, he opened the HOA binder. The pages were filled with dense, legalistic prose governing everything from mailbox colors to the acceptable decibel level of wind chimes. He flipped to the section on architectural and landscape control. And there it was, the clause Karen's notice had implicitly referenced. He took a yellow highlighter and drew a clean, straight line under it. Shikyagur 8.4.2. View preservation. No structure, planting, or other material including terrain modifications shall be placed or permitted to remain on any lot which may unreasonably obstruct the view from any other lot. The Architectural Control Committee ACC shall have the sole discretion to determine what constitutes an unreasonable obstruction. Travis leaned back in his chair, tapping the page, vague enough to drive a truck through. He muttered to the empty room, "Sole discretion." Those 2 words were the key. They were a blank check for a board president with an agenda. The dune wasn't just a pile of sand. It was the culmination of a 5-year project, the foundation for a legacy. He had envisioned a deep, cool pond, lined with bentonite clay, its northern edge graced by a pristine, man-made beach of pale quartz sand. It was for his brother's kids, for the grandchildren he hoped to have one day, a place for them to learn to swim, to skip stones, to make the kinds of memories that anchor a family to a piece of land. Karen Rivera saw an obstruction. He saw the future. He picked up his phone and dialed his older brother, Dale. Dale had spent 30 years as a Travis County clerk before retiring, and he understood the arcane machinery of local governance better than anyone. "Hey, Trav, everything all right?" Dale's voice was calm and steady, as always. Travis explained the encounter at the block party. The courtesy notice. The specific clause in the CC&Rs. She's coming after the dune. Dale. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Karen Rivera," Dale said, the name tasting like a bad memory. "I remember her. Her husband's a developer. Right, Rivera Development Group. They tried to get the county to rezone that whole parcel for high-density housing back in '08. The commissioners shot them down." "This feels bigger than a view," Travis said. "It feels personal." with these HOA types. It always is. Dale cautioned. Listen to me. Travis, don't get emotional. Don't yell. Don't write angry emails. These people live for paperwork. They weaponize procedure. You want to fight them. You have to beat them at their own game. Paper trails beat loud voices every single time. You have your deed and your original plat map. On the table in front of me, Travis confirmed. Good. That's your scripture. Find the line that proves you're exempt. If it's not there, find the law that supersedes their bylaws. But whatever you do, treat this like a legal case, not a neighborhood squabble. Because for her, that's exactly what it is. After hanging up, Travis stared at the documents under the warm glow of the table lamp. The battle lines were drawn. Karen had her vague covenant and her sole discretion. He had his deed, his map, and a deep, unshakable conviction that a man's home was his own. The personal stake was no longer just about sand and water. It was about defending the very principle his life was built on. He spent the rest of the night poring over the fine print, the highlighter moving like a surgeon's scalpel, searching for the crack in Karen's armor. The following Friday, October 11th, the war of paper escalated. Travis was in the barn, mending a piece of tack, when he heard the crunch of tires on his gravel driveway. It was the mail carrier's familiar white truck, but instead of just leaving the mail in the box at the end of the drive, the carrier was walking up to the house with a small electronic scanner and a stiff, green and white envelope in hand. Afternoon, Travis, the carrier said, holding out the device. Got a certified one for you. Need a signature. Travis's stomach tightened. He knew, instinctively, what this was. He wiped his hands on his jeans and signed the screen with the attached stylus. The carrier handed him the envelope. It was from the Sunset Shores Estates HOA, care of a third-party management company in Austin. It felt formal, heavy, and cold. Back inside at the dining table, he slit the envelope open with a pocket knife. The letter inside was printed on heavy bond paper, embossed with the HOA's logo, a cartoonish sun setting over a series of identical rooftops. The tone was no longer friendly. Formal notice of violation. Date October 10th, 2023. Property lot 7, 1280. County Road 43 violation. CC&R. Grade .4.2. View preservation. Dear Mr. Merrill, this letter serves as a formal notice of a continuing violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC&Rs for the Sunset Shores Estates community. Following a review by the Architectural Control Committee ACC, the unapproved terrain feature, henceforth the dune on your property has been found to be in non-compliance with community standards regarding view preservation. As per the association's enforcement policy, a fine of 100 GWRs has been assessed to your account. You have 30 days from the date of this notice to cure the violation. Curing the violation requires the complete removal of the unapproved terrain feature and restoration of the original grade of the land. Failure to comply within the specified time frame will result in further fines and enforcement actions as permitted by the governing documents and Texas state law. You may appeal this decision in writing to the Board of Directors within 15 days. Sincerely, the Sunset Shores Architectural Control Committee. Travis read the letter 3 times. The words continuing violation, fine, and enforcement actions leaped off the page. This was no longer a suggestion. It was a demand, backed by a financial penalty and the threat of more to come. The certified mail, the official letterhead, the impersonal sign-off, it was all designed to intimidate, to signal that the full, bureaucratic weight of the HOA was now being brought to bear. He placed the letter next to the courtesy notice. The first was a veiled threat delivered with a smile. This was a declaration of war delivered by the federal government. His dream of a pond and a beach for his family was now officially a violation that needed to be cured. The demand to restore the original grade was particularly insidious. It wasn't just asking him to stop. It was demanding he erase years of hard work, to undo a part of his own vision for his land. The threat was no longer abstract. It was tangible, official, and ticking. The 30-day deadline hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. Travis followed his brother's advice to the letter. He spent the weekend drafting a formal response, his tone meticulously polite and factual. He referenced his original deed, which made no mention of view easements. He pointed out that his property was explicitly zoned for agricultural use by the county, a designation that predated the Sunset Shores development and typically exempted it from cosmetic residential covenants. He attached a high-quality scan of his plat map, highlighting the boundary lines that proved the dune was located entirely on his private property and not in any common area. He concluded by formally appealing the violation and requesting a meeting with the board to discuss the matter. He sent it via certified mail, return receipt requested, to the HOA's management company on Monday, October 14th. A week passed with no response. On Monday, October 21st, he called the management company and asked for the property manager, a man named Henderson. After 10 minutes on hold, a slick, disinterested voice came on the line. "Mr. Merrill." "Yes, we received your correspondence," Henderson said, his tone suggesting Travis was a minor annoyance in a very busy day. "I've forwarded it to the board for their review." "And have they reviewed it?" Travis asked. "The board's position is that the violation notice stands. The ACC's decision is final unless the board chooses to overturn it, and they have not." "Did they even look at the plat map I sent? It clearly shows my lot has no view restrictions," Travis pressed, keeping his voice level. "Mr. Merrill, our role is to enforce the decisions of the board," Henderson said, "the verbal equivalent of a brick wall. If you wish to discuss it further, you can attend a board meeting. The next one is tonight at 7 p.m. at the community clubhouse." Travis arrived at the clubhouse at 6:45 p.m. The meeting was already underway in a sterile, fluorescent-lit room. Karen Rivera sat at the head of a long table, flanked by 4 other board members who all wore expressions of pained seriousness. About a dozen residents were scattered in the audience chairs. Travis took a seat in the back and waited. The board spent 45 minutes debating the merits of switching landscaping companies and the proper shade of beige for repainting the community mailboxes. "Finally," Karen announced, "that concludes our scheduled agenda. We will now open the floor for a brief homeowner forum. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes." Travis was the first to stand. "Travis Merrill, Lot 7. I'm here about the violation notice I received regarding my property." Karen looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but her composure was immediate. She consulted her agenda, then looked back at him with an expression of mild regret. "Ah, Mr. Merrill, I'm afraid this matter is not on the prepared agenda for tonight's meeting." "The property manager told me to come here to discuss it," Travis countered. "He may have been mistaken," Karen said smoothly. "Board discussions of specific enforcement actions are typically handled in executive session or after a formal appeal has been placed on the agenda. It's a matter of due process. You can submit a written request to be added to the agenda for next month's meeting. The deadline for submissions is the 1st of the month." It was a perfect procedural trap. She was using the HOA's own rules of order to shut him down, to delay and frustrate him, all while maintaining a veneer of detached, bureaucratic fairness. The other board members stared blankly ahead. The residents in the audience began to fidget, their attention waning. He had been dismissed. So the fines will continue to accrue while I wait a month for you to put me on an agenda? Travis asked, the frustration finally seeping into his voice. Karen offered a small, sympathetic shrug. The enforcement process is automated. I'm afraid. It's tied to the timeline in the notice. It's really out of our hands until the matter can be formally heard. She had checkmated him. He stood there for a moment, the eyes of the room on him, feeling utterly powerless. He had followed the rules, presented his evidence, and been stonewalled by a system designed to protect the board's authority above all else. He gave a curt nod, turned, and walked out of the meeting. The sound of Karen's voice calling for the next speaker following him out the door. The first obstacle hadn't just been a hurdle. It was a fortress of procedural indifference. The promised fines began to arrive like clockwork. A second letter, dated November 1st, informed him that since the violation had not been cured, an additional fine of $200 had been assessed. The total due was now $300. The letters were becoming a constant, oppressive presence on his dining table. Dale's voice of reason echoed in his mind. Paper trails beat loud voices. Travis knew he couldn't fight this alone. He needed a professional. Someone who knew how to navigate this specific kind of bureaucratic warfare. Dale gave him a name, Elena Vargas, a paralegal in a small Austin firm who specialized in real estate law and had a reputation as an HOA dragon slayer. Elena was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 30s, with a wry smile and an intense, focused energy. She listened to Travis's story in her cluttered office, nodding as she reviewed his documents. "Standard playbook," she said, tapping the violation notice. "Vague clause. Subjective enforcement. Procedural roadblocks. They're trying to wear you down, hoping you'll either pay the fines or give up and remove the dune. They're betting you don't have the time or the money to fight it." "They bet wrong," Travis said. "Good." Elena cracked a slight smile. "Because I love these cases. Let's start digging." She filed a formal document request with the HOA on Travis's behalf, demanding all board meeting minutes, financial records, and correspondence related to Lot 7 and Covenant, Paragraph 8.4.2. While they waited for the official response, Elena began her own reconnaissance on the HOA's public-facing online document portal. A few days later, she called Travis. "I think I found something. It's in the board meeting, minutes from June 2009. That's when they amended the CC&Rs to add the View Preservation Clause." "What about it?" Travis asked, leaning forward at his desk. "The official PDF is on their portal, just like it's supposed to be," Elena explained. "But look at it." She emailed him the file. Travis opened it. It was a scan of the typed minutes from the meeting over a decade ago. He scrolled through the first 2 pages, which detailed attendance and old business. Then he got to page 3, the section titled New Business Proposed Amendment to Article 8. The next 3 paragraphs were completely obscured by thick, black boxes. It was a heavy-handed, digital redaction. "What the hell is this?" Travis said, staring at the screen. "Exactly." Elena's voice came through the phone. "They're legally required to provide homeowners with access to the minutes. And they have. But they've hidden the part that matters: the discussion, the rationale, the vote, everything. The part that would explain the context and intent of the rule they're using against you. This isn't a clerical error, Travis. This is a deliberate cover-up. The question is, what happened in that meeting that Karen Rivera doesn't want anyone to see?" The mystery deepened. This was no longer just about a personal vendetta. It was about something in the past, something hidden in those black boxes that the board was desperate to keep buried. The redacted minutes were a clue, a breadcrumb leading into the heart of the HOA's history. And Travis felt a renewed surge of determination. He wasn't just fighting for his dune anymore. He was fighting to uncover a truth that had been intentionally concealed for over a decade. Elena, undeterred by the redacted minutes, decided to bypass the HOA's curated document portal entirely. If they're hiding the official record, we'll go find the original record, she declared. She spent a day at the Travis County Recorder's office, sifting through dusty archives and microfilm. By late afternoon, she called Travis, her voice electric with discovery. "I've got it," she said, the sound of paper rustling in the background. The original developer plat map for the entire Sunset Shores subdivision, filed in 2004. It's the master document, the one all subsequent deeds are based on. And Travis prompted, his heart rate quickening. "And Lot 7 is special," Elena said, a triumphant edge to her voice. "Right on the detailed survey for your parcel. There's a note from the original surveyor. It's tiny, but it's here in black and white. I'm reading it right now. No view easement applicable to Lot 7 due to pre-existing agricultural use designation and topography." Travis sank into his chair. "So I was right." "You were more than right," Elena corrected him. "This isn't a matter of interpreting a vague bylaw. This note on the foundational plat map means Figure 8.4.2 legally cannot be applied to your property. It never could. The restriction doesn't exist for you. This is the smoking gun. Travis, they're enforcing a rule that they have no jurisdiction to enforce." The relief was immense, a physical weight lifting from his shoulders. But as this procedural mystery was being solved, his brother Dale was unraveling the personal one, spurred by his memory of the land deal. Dale had spent his time doing what he did best, digging through public records. He cross-referenced property sale records from 10 years ago with the state's business filings. He called Travis that same evening. "I know why she's doing this. Trav, what did you find?" "You remember when you bought the ranch? It was a bank auction." "Right." "Yeah, the old Henderson place went into foreclosure," Travis recalled. "Well, you weren't the only bidder," Dale said. "The runner-up was a company called Rivera Development Group. They were planning to subdivide your 240 acres into another phase of Sunset Shores. You outbid them by $10,000. Guess who the principal owner of Rivera Development Group is?" The puzzle pieces snapped into place with sickening clarity. "Karen's husband," Travis said, the words feeling like dust in his mouth. "Bingo," Dale confirmed. "You didn't just buy a piece of land. Travis, you personally, publicly cost her family a multi-million-dollar development deal. You embarrassed them. This isn't about a view. It never was. This is a vendetta, a decade in the making. She's been waiting for an opportunity to stick it to you, and your dune gave her the perfect excuse." The double revelation was staggering. Elena had found the legal key, the indisputable proof of his exemption. Dale had found the motive, a deep-seated, personal grudge nursed for 10 years. This wasn't a random act of a power-hungry HOA president. It was a calculated, long-simmering revenge plot. Karen wasn't just misinterpreting the rules. She was maliciously applying a rule she almost certainly knew didn't apply to him. All to settle an old score. The fight was now crystal clear, and Travis knew exactly who his enemy was and why she was trying to tear down his dream. The victory of discovering the plat map was short-lived. On Monday, November 11th, a new envelope arrived. This one from a high-powered Austin law firm. Inside was a letter that made Travis's blood run cold. Notice of intent to file liens. It was a formal, terrifying legal document. It stated that due to his continued failure to resolve the outstanding covenant violations and associated fines, which now totaled $2,500 with legal fees and late charges. The Sunset Shores Estates HOA would be filing a property lien against Lot 7 in 60 days. This was the ultimate threat. A lien was a legal claim against his property, a black mark on his title that could prevent him from selling or refinancing. If left unpaid, the HOA could, in theory, foreclose on the lien and force the sale of his ranch to collect their debt. They were threatening to take his home, his land, everything he had worked for, over a dune of sand and a 10-year-old grudge. The stress was immense. Travis found himself awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, the legal jargon from the letter echoing in his mind. The financial strain of hiring Elena was already adding up. A full-blown legal battle against an HOA's law firm would be ruinous. Just as the pressure reached its peak, Elena called with another breakthrough. But her tone was different, less triumphant, more cautious. "I got them," she said. The unredacted minutes from 2009. How, Travis asked. An anonymous email. "My guess is a former board member who knows where the bodies are buried. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's inside." The unredacted text revealed everything. Karen Rivera, then just the ACC chair, had personally proposed the View Preservation Amendment. Her argument was that it was necessary to prevent a commercial storage company from buying a nearby lot and putting up a metal monstrosity that would tank property values. But the bombshell was in her next statement, captured verbatim in the minutes. "This language is designed to protect our residential sightlines and will not apply to pre-existing agricultural zoned exteriors like Lot 7, which has its own topographical exemptions." She knew. Travis breathed. She knew from the very beginning that I was exempt. She said it herself in a public meeting. She did. Elena confirmed. "This proves malicious intent. It's an open and shut case. But Travis, there's something else." Elena explained that her deep dive into the 2009 records had uncovered a second, separate issue. The HOA board at the time, in their haste to pass the View Amendment, had bundled it with several other rule changes into a single vote, potentially violating a state statute that required separate votes on materially different amendments. "We could use this procedural error to argue that the entire 2009 amendment package is invalid," Elena said. "It's a scorched earth option. It would nuke Paragraph 8.4.2 from orbit. You'd win. No question." "That sounds perfect," Travis said. "Here's the problem," Elena continued. "One of the other rules in that package was Paragraph 9.1.5, which governs garden structures. And I found out the board is currently using that specific rule to go after an elderly widow, a Mrs. Gable, on Lot 42. They're fining her $200 a month for her rose trellises, which are technically 2 inches too tall. The rule is petty, but it's also the only thing stopping her next-door neighbor from building a massive, ugly tool shed right on the property line. If we invalidate the whole amendment package to save you, we also invalidate the rule that's, in a weird way, protecting Mrs. Gable from a genuine nuisance." The moral dilemma landed on Travis like a physical weight. He had two paths. The first was the nuclear option, a clean, decisive victory that would not only exonerate him, but also expose the board's procedural incompetence. But it would have collateral damage, harming an innocent, vulnerable woman in the process. The second path was harder, more nuanced. He could stick to the evidence that applied only to him, the plat map, and Karen's own words, and fight a more targeted battle. It was a riskier strategy, leaving the board's broader power intact. But it would protect Mrs. Gable. He thought of the old woman, likely terrified by the HOA's threatening letters, fighting a lonely battle over her beloved roses. His fight with Karen was about a principle. For Mrs. Gable, it was about her home, her garden, her small piece of peace. He couldn't sacrifice her for his own gain. "We can't hurt her," Travis said finally, his voice firm. "We stick to the plat map and the unredacted minutes. We prove my case specifically. We win on the merits, not on a technicality." It was a decision that would make his fight harder, but it was the right one. He wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to prove he was better than the system he was fighting against. Chapter 8. The Climax. The evening of Wednesday, November 20th, was cold and clear. The community clubhouse was packed for the annual homeowners meeting. The one time a year, the board had to face the entire community. Fluorescent lights hummed over the rows of uncomfortable folding chairs, casting a sterile pallor on the tense faces of the residents. At the front of the room, Karen Rivera and the board sat at a long table, a fortress of procedural authority. Behind them, a large screen displayed the meeting agenda. Next to it, a bright red digital clock was set to 5:00. Travis had arrived early and placed a slim, professionally bound evidence packet on every single chair in the room. He had registered for a 5-minute speaking slot during the open forum, the last item on the agenda. He sat in the back row, his brother Dale beside him for support, and waited as the board droned on about budget approvals and holiday decoration guidelines. Finally, Karen looked at her watch. "That brings us to the open forum. Each speaker will have 5 minutes. First on the list is Travis Merrill." A murmur went through the room. Travis walked calmly to the podium at the front, placed his notes on the lectern, and looked out at the faces of his neighbors. He nodded politely to the board. The red clock started its silent, inexorable countdown: 4, 59, 4, 58, 4, 57. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified slightly by the microphone. "My name is Travis Merrill, and I live on Lot 7. For the past 6 weeks, your board has been pursuing an aggressive enforcement action against me. Many of you are aware of this. All of you now have the facts in your hands. Please turn to page 1 of the packet in front of you." The room filled with the rustle of turning pages. 4:30. On page 1, you'll see the friendly reminder I was handed by Mrs. Rivera at the Harvest Fest. On pages 2 through 5, you will find the certified violation notices and the escalating fines, which now total over $2,000. And, on page 6, you will find the notice of intent to file a lien, a threat to take my home. The board has taken these actions based on a single clause in the CC&Rs, section 8.4.2, which you can see on page 7. He paused, letting them read the vague, sweeping language. Karen was watching him, her face a rigid mask of composure. 3:45. The board claims my property is in violation of this view preservation rule. Now, please turn to page 8. He clicked a remote, and a high-resolution image of his original plat map filled the screen behind the board. He had circled a small notation in red. "This is the official, county-filed plat map for our community." As you can see, there is a very specific note from the original developer regarding my property. It reads, "No view easement applicable to Lot 7 due to pre-existing agricultural use designation." This foundational legal document, which predates our HOA, explicitly exempts my property from the very rule the board is using to fine me and threaten me with foreclosure. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were leaning over, pointing at the page in their packets. 2:30. You might wonder if this was simply an oversight by the board. Please turn to page 9. The image on the screen changed to the unredacted 2009 meeting minutes. He highlighted a single sentence. "These are the minutes from the meeting where Figure 8.4.2 was adopted." In it, the proponent of the rule, then ACC Chair Karen Rivera, states, and I quote, "This language, will not apply to pre-existing, agricultural zoned exteriors like Lot 7. The board, and Mrs. Rivera specifically, knew from the very beginning that I was exempt. This was not an oversight. The murmurs grew louder. A man in the front row turned to stare openly at Karen, whose face had gone pale. 115. So why would the board pursue a baseless action they knew was legally invalid? Please turn to the final page. Page 10. The screen now showed the public record of the land auction from 10 years prior. This is a public record showing that my winning bid for my ranch directly cost a company owned by Mrs. Rivera's husband a major development opportunity. This action against me is not about a view. It is a personal vendetta, carried out using your HOA dues and the board's authority as a weapon. The room was electric. The silence was gone, replaced by a rising tide of angry whispers. 0:45. Now, in my research, Travis continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more personal. I discovered a procedural error from that 2009 meeting that could invalidate that entire slate of amendments. It would be an easy way out for me, but I will not use that option, because another rule passed that day protects an elderly resident from a genuine nuisance, and it would be wrong to harm an innocent neighbor to win my own fight. He looked directly at Mrs. Gable in the third row, who looked back at him with wide, grateful eyes. 0:25. Good rules and legitimate authority should be protected, but a targeted, malicious abuse of that authority must be stopped. I am not asking you to dissolve the board or burn down the system. I am asking you, the homeowners to whom this board is accountable, to direct them to cease and desist all actions against me, to nullify the fines, and to end this abuse of power. He gathered his notes, looked at the board one last time, and then at the community. My 5 minutes are almost up. Thank you for your time. He stepped away from the podium. The clock on the screen flashed, U010. Travis walked back to his seat as a stunned. Heavy silence fell over the room, the kind that precedes a storm. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Then, the room erupted. It wasn't just murmurs. It was an uproar. A homeowner in the second row, a retired lawyer Travis recognized, shot to his feet. Point of order! Madam President, he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. Based on the evidence presented, I move for an immediate, independent, third-party audit of all board activities and legal expenditures for the past 24 months. Seconded came a chorus of voices from across the room. Karen, visibly shaken, banged her gavel. That motion is out of order. This is an open forum, not a business meeting. The bylaws state that a motion can be raised from the floor at the annual meeting with a majority vote, another homeowner yelled, holding up his own copy of the CC&Rs. The HOA's lawyer, a man in a perfectly tailored but now slightly sweat-stained suit, leaned over and whispered urgently into Karen's ear. Her face, already pale, seemed to crumble. She looked out at the sea of angry faces. No longer a congregation she commanded, but a tribunal that was judging her. Dale's friend, a burly man named George, who ran the local hardware store, stood up from the back. I'd like to make another motion, he said, his voice booming through the clubhouse. I move for a vote of no confidence in the leadership of President Rivera. The room exploded in shouts of agreement. Yes. Vote no confidence. The lawyer whispered to Karen again. She swallowed hard, her composure completely shattered. She tapped the microphone, the feedback screeching through the speakers. The board, she began, her voice thin and shaky, will take the evidence concerning Lot 7 under advisement. All enforcement actions and fines against Mr. Merrill are hereby tabled, pending a full internal review. It was too little, too late. The community wasn't interested in an internal review. They had seen the proof of a vendetta, of lies, of their own money being used to fund a personal grudge. The power in the room had irrevocably shifted from the handful of people at the front table to the dozens of homeowners in the folding chairs. The meeting devolved into procedural chaos, with residents shouting questions and demands. Karen and the board were trapped, unable to regain control. Travis and Dale slipped out a side door as the arguments raged on. The cold night air felt clean and sharp. Dale clapped a heavy hand on his brother's shoulder. "Paper trails, Trav," he said with a grim smile. "Paper trails beat loud voices every time." Travis looked back at the clubhouse, at the angry silhouettes moving behind the lit windows. He hadn't just won his battle. He had given the entire community the tools to clean their own house. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and decisive. An email, sent from the HOA's management company, formally announced the resignations of Karen Rivera and two of her closest allies on the board. The independent audit was approved, and its initial findings revealed a pattern of procedural irregularities and questionable legal spending under Karen's tenure. A new interim board was elected in a special session, comprised of residents who had been vocal critics of the old guard. One of their first official acts was to send Travis a formal letter via registered mail. It wasn't a threat, but an apology. The letter officially rescinded all violations, nullified all fines, and expunged the entire matter from his record. They included a public apology for the unwarranted and malicious actions of the previous board. True to his word, Travis didn't just retreat back to his ranch. At the next community meeting, he volunteered to lead a new, homeowner-led community covenant review committee. His mission, he stated, was not to eliminate the rules, but to ensure they were applied fairly, transparently, and without prejudice, adding clauses that required concrete evidence for violations and removed subjective language like sole discretion. His gesture of goodwill was met with a round of applause. He was no longer the outsider. He had become a respected leader in the community he'd once held at arm's length. Months passed. Winter gave way to a vibrant Texas spring. The bluebonnets carpeted the fields, and the air was warm and full of life. Travis was on his porch one Saturday morning, sipping coffee and watching the sunlight shimmer on his pond. The dune, his dune, stood peaceful and proud, a silent monument to the fight he had won. A large landscaping truck rumbled up his driveway and stopped. The foreman got out, a clipboard in his hand. Travis Merrill. "That's me," Travis said, walking down the steps. "Got a delivery for you. A grove of live oaks, paid in full." Travis frowned. "I think you have the wrong address. I didn't order any trees." The foreman smiled and handed him a small, sealed envelope. "The customer said you'd say that. She left this note for you." Travis opened the envelope. The card inside was simple, elegant, with a single, embossed rose on the front. The handwriting was the shaky but beautiful script of an older woman. "Mr. Merrill. For the man who protected the roses, thank you. Eleanor Gable." Travis looked up from the note, toward the truck where workers were beginning to unload 5 beautiful, mature oak trees. He looked over at his pond, at the pristine beach he had fought so hard for, a legacy for a future generation. And now, thanks to an act of quiet integrity, that legacy would grow in the shade of a stranger's gratitude. A deep, profound sense of peace settled over him. He had not only taken back his land, he had reclaimed a piece of his community, transforming a battlefield into a foundation of mutual respect. He stood there for a long time, watching the new trees being placed, a quiet smile on his face.